Following video is brought to you by the Boston Sports Entertainment Network. Please consider liking and subscribing for more Boston sports content.
I got the Boston Celtics going to the final.
I got them winning without.
It's time to represent your city. Put your hands up. Cali, you know we do it for Boston. Hey, ain't nobody gonna like Boston. Yeah, hey, can't nobody do it like Boston. Where the legends get made, where the banners get raised, bright lights, big stage. Boston. All the fire we bring in a city full of rings, it's a beautiful thing out in Boston. And you ain't hard like that. You don't put it on the line with your squad like that. That's right, Boston. All we do is win like cigars in the gym, and we at it again. I say, Beantown, what's up? What's up? 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 Feel the energy shift, now we jumping at the gym. Represent, showing out how we ball above the rim. Larry Legend, 86, to the truth in 08. Cement your name with the all-time greats. Till banner 18 in the Raptors. Celtic green, only green that matters. It's about that time. Ain't another city that's louder than mine. Always gonna shine with the game on the line. What you think was gonna happen, man? That's how we do it in Boston. Ain't nobody gonna like Boston. Yeah. Can't nobody do it like Boston.
All right, welcome into this episode of Dynasty Proud, brought to you by BSEN. I am here as always. I'm Ryan. We have Alex here with us, and we are joined by a guest this week. It's Anthony Passiola. You can follow him on Twitter. He's at Anthony Passi, P-A-S-C-I at the end. He's a writer for SI Now on the Miami Heat and also covers Kansas State athletics based on his profile and the Philadelphia 76ers as well. So that's a plus. We have two teams in the East we really want to talk about with him, but the main focus today will be on Miami, but we can throw in some chatter about Philly as well. Before we get started, I did just want to mention we are giving away a free Kevin Garnett Celtics jersey. So go check out our show's Twitter page. It's at DynastyProud18. Check the pinned post for the details. All you have to do is like and retweet the post and then comment your favorite Celtics player. And the winner will then be drawn just before tip-off on opening night on October 22nd. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, make sure we plug that. But guys, how are you doing?
I'm doing well today. No complaints. I might have to enter myself in that Garnett giveaway, honestly.
Add another team to your portfolio.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so obviously you've got a lot of things you can cover with us, but I think the number one thing we wanted to talk about first off was just kind of about the Heat offseason. I guess I'd start with the Jimmy Butler situation. I mean, do you think that he'll end up staying long term? Is he going to be too unhappy? What is Pat Riley doing? Like, where do you stand?
So it all starts when Pat Riley didn't extend Jimmy at the end of last season. I didn't freak out about that like a lot of people did. I thought, it wasn't that big of a deal. Pat Riley wants Jimmy to prove that he can play more games, and Jimmy wants Pat Riley to prove that he can put a competent roster around him. Both sides have to prove something to each other this year, and I think both sides will. As you were saying, I do think he stays long term. He literally said yesterday, I don't care about the money. I'm here to win. He also loves the city of Miami. Where I don't see another city in my mind where he'd be like, oh yeah, I really want to live there. I think that matters to Jimmy a lot more than people think. Just talking about a destination like Houston, yeah, that's not a bad place, but it's not Miami. Miami is one of the biggest NBA cities. I can't imagine Jimmy wanting to leave Miami to go live in Houston. I just don't see it.
So I think a big part of it is initially Heat fans, they're kind of freaking out a little bit because naturally when you have your star player and then he's not extended past next year, this could be it. But that, like you said, it does require faith and trust on both sides. That the Heat can put a roster on him that can win because he's kind of at the very end of his prime right now. So if the Heat are going in a direction of not winning, he may want to move on. And, he can always have a house in Miami, live in Miami. He doesn't have much time left. He doesn't have a long runway left. He may have 3-4 more years left in the league. Not everyone's LeBron is going to play into their 40s. So, and especially at the level that he's at right now, this really could be it. So I think from motivation standpoint, you definitely have that with Jimmy Butler this year. He may do less side quests during the course of the season, maybe less tennis matches or everything else that he does outside of basketball because, he's got to earn that contract. I mean, his name can take him so far, but if he's missing half the games because of injury or other things he's doing, he may not get that big offer. So if that's what he's looking for, then, he's got to put it forth. And from the team perspective, they got to prove to Jimmy, like, okay, we want to keep him long term. Let's put the team around him. Because as we'll get to over the course of the show, there's been a lot of movement in the East. Like teams have gotten better in Miami, at least from an outside perspective. I mean, yeah, they made little, moves around the edge, but they really haven't made anything substantial when they were already playing catch up to the teams in the East.
Yeah, and another thing I want to stress is Heat fans shouldn't freak out if Jimmy does leave. I don't think that's the end of the world because the way I personally see it, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later on, Miami can't compete in this Eastern Conference for a title. They can make noise. They could take a team to 7 games, but they're not going to win the NBA Finals with this team they have right now. That's my personal opinion. So if Jimmy does leave after this season and they decide to go in a younger direction, I don't see a world where that's a bad thing, where you start building around Bam, Tyler, Jaime, Khalil. Like if you're building around that group of guys, I don't think I would freak out as a fan.
I think it's a good foundation. One thing I will say is to keep an eye on where the Heat are going over the course of the first few months of the season. If they get out of the gate slow and they're hovering around, playing possibly even below that, once you get closer to the deadline, it might benefit both Jimmy and the Heat to move forward at that point because then you can get something for him and you give Jimmy a better chance to win versus wasting one of the last seasons where he's going to be like a high-level player in a situation where he's going to be at best case playing. And like you said, they may surprise one team. They may take somebody down. You could get a whole injury luck like they had the season they went to the finals, but this team's not winning a title. So that has to matter. Like you don't want to be stuck in NBA purgatory just to have an okay season.
Yeah. Pat Riley's not an idiot. He'll either know that Jimmy's going to extend or is leaning towards extending, or like you said, he'll probably move him at the deadline if that's what both sides are thinking.
I do wonder though, like like you said, Butler does seem to like it in Miami. He can like it all he wants. I just wonder if the relationship with Riley itself is maybe potentially a problem. Like maybe not to this extent, but I think about like the way Bill Belichick operated the Patriots for a long time. Like after Brady was gone, like he almost just seemed to kind of lose his touch. He wasn't making the right moves and guys just didn't want to be there and that the morale was low. I wonder if Butler's sort of in that place where he's just like, I don't really want to play for this guy anymore.
Jimmy's had problems in a lot of places he's been in his career. So it's a valid concern because you go to the Minnesota stuff where he like played with the third team, went on national TV, called everybody out. Like that was crazy. Then you go to Philadelphia and he's beefing with Ben Simmons the whole time.
But he was right about that, by the way.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
And he may have been right about Minnesota too.
True. My more point with that is just he has had problems in the past. He's not afraid to speak his mind. So he's never been afraid to speak his mind to me, which is what's promising about his relationship with Riley. Because everything he said in training camp and preseason has been positive about his relationship with Riley. And Butler's a pretty honest guy. So to me, him being straight up is not a question. I don't think he's lying about anything he said. I think he truly is there to win. He does not care about the money. I believe that for the most part. Sure, there's a little bit of added motivation about getting that max contract. But I would say if he had a problem with Riley, he would say it. I don't think he would beat around the bush. I don't think he would lie. I think he would straight up tell the press that he has a problem.
Yeah, Riley has been a difficult guy for stars sometimes to get along with. Like, kind of almost forced LeBron out of town, D Wade out of town. D Wade's like, the king of Miami. Like, he loves it here more than anything. LeBron, it was a stop along the way. So Jimmy Butler is not quite in the D Wade category of like, lifelong Heat, getting a statue outside, getting his jersey retired. So if it can happen to D Wade, it can happen to Jimmy Butler. Like I said, just monitor where the Heat are going because it's not like a guaranteed sure thing Jimmy's back. And it honestly might not be in the best interest of the franchise anyways to extend someone who's 35 to close to their 40 when for 99% of players, they're going to start seeing, diminishing returns on that, especially skill-wise.
You said something interesting there about Jimmy getting his jersey retired. If he retires with the Heat, do you think he still doesn't get his jersey retired?
I think it depends. do they have like one more run in them? Like if the ceiling for the next, if let's say he stays there and the ceiling is play in every single year, maybe over the course of the next 3-4 years, there's one playoff series win. I mean, I guess they don't have a lot of jerseys retired, and he would have been there a long time, taking the 2 finals and was the alpha dog for the duration of most of it. So you can definitely make the argument for it. They did retire Bosch. They retired Wade. I think they're going to retire LeBron. So, but those guys all won titles there. If he never wins a title there, that means he probably isn't getting back there either. I don't know. It's a tough one. I mean, he's not getting a statue, but like, I guess it just depends how much they feel he was a part of what they did. Like KG was only in Boston for 6 years. He won 1 title. Granted, he did win a title, which is a big thing, but he changed the culture. He became like the face of that era of the Celtics, even almost more so than Pierce, who had, was a lifelong Celtic. So I think the title puts him over the top and it guarantees it. But I think the way it looks right now with the team, where you don't see a real path to contention with them going forward, that even if he does sign long term, I really don't know. If he leaves after this year, I don't think he does. I don't think he's been there long enough or accomplished enough, even with the finals runs, just because they were never like a real contender during that time. So right now, I'd say it's a coin flip. If he is not here next year, especially due to the Heat not really, taking the next step or getting back to where they've been the last few years, I would say no.
Yeah,
But it
I
could
don't
go
think
either way.
Yeah, it's not a guarantee, but honestly, I think if he signs one more contract, I think they'll retire it personally. But I see where you're coming from.
Sorry, guys, my internet's bugging out a little bit, so I'm a little behind y'all. But this is a personal issue of mine. Like, I just think that jersey retirements should be reserved for the absolute greatest of the great. Like, I think the Celtics have too many jerseys retired, personally.
Agreed.
I think there's a lot of teams that have too many jerseys retired. Vince Carter getting his jersey retired with the Nets makes no sense to me. Like, none. The Raptors, there's an argument, but I don't like that either. I think it should be reserved for Bill Russell, Jackie Robinson, Tom Brady. Like, it should be the absolute greatest of the great. And unless you transcended your sport, your jersey should not be retired. But that's a personal beef of mine.
I think you retire names. Like,
yeah,
you put, like, names
I agree.
around.
I think I like the way the NFL does it. A lot of teams do like a ring of honor. Like, they'll put a guy's name up there if he's a big contributor to their franchise and somebody that everybody who's a fan of that team would know, love, and respect. Like,
totally agree.
Great. Yeah. Put their name in the rafters, but retiring a jersey and never letting anybody, because there's guys on this, like Baylor Shireman for the Celtics is wearing number 55 because there's no numbers left. Like, it's absurd. I don't like that.
Red Auerbach, the architect of the Celtics, has a number retired. Like, he didn't have
that's
a number
crazy to me.
to begin with.
And
he has number 2, which is a valuable number.
And I can see how, like, the idea at the time was they probably didn't think quite so far ahead that the NBA was going to last the way that it is, and it like probably didn't see it being what it is now.
1950s with their numbers in the rafters, right.
They probably weren't thinking about it that way at the time, but now I think it might be time to free a couple of those up.
Unless you're the Lakers, where you don't retire anybody from the Minneapolis Lakers number, but you'll count their championships. So,
who was it that just like got a number like unretired and they could wear it? I'm blanking on who that was. Somebody is wearing a number that was retired and they got permission like from the family to wear it. It might not even be NBA, but I just think that's it's an interesting concept to me of unretiring the number for a specific guy. I thought that was a little weird. I'm blanking on who it is, but
to that point, I can't think of that name, but during the Kevin Durant summer pitches in the Hamptons back in 2016, I guess Reggie Lewis, who had number 35 for the Celtics, who passed away young, I guess his mother even offered up that she would, allow Kevin Durant to wear that number if he were to come to the Celtics. So, I mean, that was almost kind of the ultimate pitch, even more so than Brady being in the Hamptons for some reason, along with Kelly Olynyk. So
I was just going to say Olynyk was there for some reason. So I guess, we talked a little, you kind of answered one of the questions I was going to ask, which was just about the kind of the perceived lack of moves and roster turnover for the Heat. How are you feeling about the number 15 pick this year, Khalil Ware? He's a 7-footer who started out at Oregon and then went to Indiana last year. He's a big dude. From what I understand, he looked pretty good in the summer league for whatever that's worth. We've always said that you don't learn who can play in the summer league, but you do learn who can't. And it doesn't look like he can't play. So how are you feeling about him?
So my first thought on draft night is why, from a journalist perspective, why didn't we draft Jared McCain? That was my first thought. Not from a basketball standpoint, just Jared McCain's a content machine. That guy's always doing something. As a player, as a fit on the Heat, I liked it. Bam was one of the biggest guys on the Heat, and he was like 6'9". Now they have a true center on the roster, which is huge to me. But what stood out in preseason, specifically, is sometimes Spo will just throw guys into the fire. Like they'll play 30 minutes a game in preseason. He's not doing that with Khalil, which I find, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but it's different for him in recent years. Hame played 4 years at UCLA, came in straight away, played like that, which has to do with him playing 4 years at college, to be fair. Khalil was the fourth center in the game. I think it was yesterday against the Pelicans. Kevin Love, Bam, and Thomas Bryant all played over him. He didn't come into like the end of the third quarter. So to me, that shows that he's a part of their long-term plan, like already. Like Spo already has it painted in his mind that one day Bam and Khalil will start in the front court. Bam at the 4, Khalil at the 5. And I think that's part of the reason Bam's been doing all this three-point shot work, right? I'm sure you guys have seen it this summer. He shot like 7 the other day in a game, which is ridiculous for him. So I think he's preparing to transfer positions, honestly.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And just even the way he's being coached, like you saw Spo, I think it was yesterday, where Khalil Ware was playing defense and he was so out of position, and Spo almost came onto the floor to scream at him while the play was still happening. Like you got to earn your way, even regardless of draft position or name or status. Like you got to earn those minutes. You got to earn your keep with the Heat, and so that right there is part of the culture and something that he's gonna have to understand if he really wants to play significant minutes early on. Especially if you're a Heat team that's already tethering around the play-in, like where there's not a lot of margin for error. You might not have the runway to give someone to learn on the fly, so that he's going to have to really earn the time that he's out there and do things correctly and play more team ball, especially from an organization that does have a lot of faith in guys that are more less renowned, like that come through like the G League route, or like they're not high level picks. Like so he wants to do everything right. I agree with Bam. Like he's definitely starting to transcend into more of a shooter. Like at first it was the mid-range shot. Now he's expanding his range, which is going to be really crucial for that team, especially going forward, especially if they don't have Jimmy in their long-term plans, to have somebody that can knock down that shot. Because what they've really lacked the last few years is a true center. So I like the pick for them. I think he fits well. I don't know what he'll contribute right away, especially like I said, someone like Jaime Jaquez was a 4-year player at UCLA. Like he was ready to step right in. Players that are raw or that are younger, that didn't have the time, they're gonna have they're gonna have to have a longer runway, and you have to limit expectations at least at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, by the end of the year, I see him as the first big man off the bench, though. Honestly, he'll surpass Thomas Bryant and Kevin Love in the depth chart, to me at least.
My thing is, if he's any good, I'm looking at it from the Celtics perspective. Maybe not this year, but in the coming seasons, it takes a while for bigs to kind of find their rhythm in the NBA when they're young, like he is. Like he's only 20 years old, but he could be a matchup issue for the Celtics specifically, because if Horford is gone and Porzingis can't stay healthy, unless they bring in somebody else in those coming years, which they might, you're left with Luke Cornett and Xavier Tillman. Like, those guys are fine, but I don't think they're necessarily going to be able to lock down a 7-footer who might have a little bit more talent than they do on the offensive side of the ball. So in a couple years, Ware could be a guy that gives you some problems if you're the Celtics, just on paper.
Well, yeah, his biggest skill, like his best skill, is defense. I think it was Brian Windhorst the other day said he looks like Derek Lively with an outside shot, which I thought was very interesting to me. I mean, he had like 3 blocks in 15 seconds the other day, because his wingspan is just ridiculous. Like that dude's reaching above the rim with no problems. Like it's crazy to me. And I mean, like I said, the Heat were missing that. And as you alluded to with the Celtics, that's going to be a problem. But then I look at the flip side. If Khalil Ware at his current weight goes up against a guy like Joel Embiid, what's going to happen there? That does not sound like a good matchup to me. But that's why you have Bam. Even though Bam's a little smaller, that dude is huge he can hold his own against anybody, which is the plus of having both builds.
I was going to say, yeah, if you have Bam, you have that guy who plays way above his size than you do with Ware, who maybe plays a little bit below that, and it might kind of even out a little bit, which could help, because Bam could definitely be the guy that takes that Embiid matchup, and then Ware has a huge mismatch on the other side, and he might just be able to dunk over somebody who's 6'8". So,
yep. Yeah, especially with the Sixers playing crazy small ball now, but I mean, we'll get to that a little later.
Yeah. I was going to ask you guys just about the preseason in general too. Like, have you seen any storylines jumping out at you? Anything around the league that has caught your attention?
Yeah, Alex, I'll let you take the wheel on that. Not while I think of something.
So I haven't gotten to watch much of the Heat as far as preseason. Like I said, the main thing that stuck out to me was, Spo coming out to scream at Khalil Ware yesterday. As far as the Celtics, I mean, it looks like I said, you can only take so much from these preseason games, but it looks like the Celtics are still a juggernaut. I mean, even like last night where they sat all their starters and they beat, a full team of starters of Toronto. And then they're like, the other games are winning by like 50 and 40 points. Like they're not going to be stopped short of, I think injuries. And I think it's really good to have the bench get these type of repetitions, because you're going to want to manage minutes a lot more this year, especially with playing late into June to win the championship. And then, having 3 guys play throughout the Olympics. Well, 2 really played, but, guys like having extended seasons and shortened summers. So you're going to need, like, seeing someone like Peyton Pritchard just seems to get better and better and better and better. So you can give guys like Drew and Derek White, who really did play the whole summer, you can manage their minutes. You can give them nights off. So as from a Celtics fan perspective, they look great. From an NBA fan perspective, you can only take so much away from the preseason, because guys are playing, they'll play in the first quarter. They're trying just to not get hurt. They're, you can't really judge too much. And then especially even the beginning of the season, like when people are getting into rhythm, but I think the East will be better. Looking at the dynamic of, Dante DiVincenzo going at kind of Tibbs and Brunson's father last night, like it looked like there might have been some problems there, like whether or not he felt like he was part of that Nova Knicks core. And I don't know if he was blindsided by the trade or just he had some problems there and he wanted to get out. But like just seeing that rivalry, it's too bad that those teams aren't both in the same conference. You only get to see it twice a year, because there might be some fireworks during one of those games this season.
Yeah, and for the Heat, I would say, and it seems weird to say this, but the biggest takeaway for me has been that Jimmy Butler's playing in the preseason. Like that speaks to me about him being legit about, I want to play every game I possibly could. Jimmy could so easily just be like, preseason, don't care about it. Let me just rest before the start of the regular season. He's played in multiple games already in the preseason. He didn't touch the floor last year. So from the Heat, that would scare me a little bit if I was another team in the Eastern Conference, if I was the Celtics. He clearly cares a little more this year about playing. And then as for the rest of the NBA, like you said, it's preseason. How much can you really take away from it? For me, one of the biggest things would probably be, looking to Philadelphia, everyone looked good there. Paul George looked ridiculous in his debut. I don't know if you guys watched that. He had actually you couldn't watch it. The NBA League Pass was down half the game, but he had 25 points that game. He was on fire in the second quarter. And then Anthony Edwards is over here in Minnesota playing like it's the NBA Finals, full trying, full energy, dropping 30 in the preseason against bench players like that. I don't even understand what goes on in his head, but it's beyond me.
I don't think Edwards really has another gear than go. I think he's just one of those guys who's like, I'm going to shove it down your throat, whether you like it or not. And I would love to take that and put it into Jason Tatum personally, but I love Tatum, but if you could give Anthony Edwards' mindset to Jason Tatum's skill set, you'd have one of the greatest players of all time, in my humble opinion. But yeah, like you guys are saying, I don't put too much stock in the preseason. I don't think anybody does. The Celtics have a bunch of guys that, probably will have smaller roles than what they're doing right now. They look good, so that's encouraging, but I'm not about to say that they're the greatest team of all time because they won a couple games that don't count in early October. There's not too much that you really can say about that. The Celtics and the Heat specifically, they don't play their first regular season game until December 2nd, which is a little annoying. But I guess looking forward, what do you think about a possible Celtics Heat playoff matchup?
Oh man, like Jimmy is pissed that he didn't play in the one last year. Did you guys see any of the Starting Five documentary?
Yeah,
I haven't caught it yet. I
Okay,
still need to
yeah,
watch
where he
it.
had some choice words about Boston.
Yes, there is some very choice words from Jimmy about Boston in there. I won't say them on here, but you can go look it up yourself. He clearly hates the Celtics, hates them more than ever now because he didn't even get to play last year. I also don't think it's talked about enough that the Heat stole a game from you guys. That was a little questionable to me.
It took
Hero
the
had
fourth
like
greatest shooting
16.
night in NBA history to make that happen, but yeah,
They
it
still
did
took a
happen.
game.
So.
They still took a game. So to me, in a playoff series, let's imagine they're fully healthy. The Heat probably won't be fully healthy, but for the sake of argument, let's say they're fully healthy. They don't come out of there with a win. I'm not delusional. They're not going to beat the Celtics in a 7-game series with their current roster. What they could do is they could scare them. They could get them really tired in the beginning of the postseason. Let's say it's the 1-8 matchup again. I could imagine a world where the Heat take them to 6 or 7 games. Boston goes into the second round where they have to face Philly or New York, and they fall short. And that's where they have a disappointing postseason because Miami tired them out so much in the first round. That's the most realistic route for the Heat to me.
So I was on this podcast last year prior to, like, during the season when we were talking with local writers about who we won in the first round. And a lot of people had, Miami Heat PTSD just because of the past. For me, I wanted them badly, regardless if Jimmy Butler was going to be hurt or not, just because I felt like they were going to take that series the most seriously. Like they could get up for the Heat. Like they understand versus other opponents that they may just, we're going to kick the crap out of this team. Like it's just go through the motions. You may end up losing extra games. With the Heat, you don't do that. So yes, they did lose a game. It took, like I said, one of the greatest shooting nights in NBA history. Jimmy Butler was doing all the talking for that team when he couldn't actually back it up because he wasn't playing. I think the Heat, it would be a similar situation. Like, yeah, you do worry about a team like that because they play hard, the culture, like tiring you out, and obviously an injury risk from something, not to even say that they're dirty, but because they play so hard, there's something that could happen. And we still didn't leave unscathed. It wasn't the Heat's fault, but, Porzingis ended up hurting himself in a game against the Heat last year. But I think for a team like the Celtics that has ambitions of going back to back, that should, walk to the first or second seed in the East, I think a series against the Heat, again, would keep them focused from the jump versus if they were to get Atlanta or they get, a team that's just barely sneaking into the play, like the play-in that gets through, where the Celtics are already thinking about the long term to June, and they might go through the motions, lose a game or two that they shouldn't. Like I think against the Heat, you can give them one game. Like there will be if Jimmy's playing, everyone's playing. There will be a Jimmy Butler game where he looks like Michael Jordan's son. But the Celtics now, they don't have the monkey on the back of. They haven't won it. Like the Heat are these boogeymen to them. Like I think at this point that doesn't exist anymore. Like the Heat play hard, they have some talent, but I think the Celtics are just so much better that 6 would be the absolute max. I honestly don't see it going past 5 if everyone's healthy and they take them seriously.
Yeah, to me, the biggest mismatch in that series would be the Bam Kristaps matchup. Kristaps has the big size advantage, like height wise, but I think Bam is just so much of a bigger body that he would kind of not dominate that matchup, but he would give Porzingis a really hard time throughout that series. Like when I say the Heat would tire them out, I specifically am pointing to Kristaps and Jason Tatum to an extent, having to guard and deal with Jimmy Butler or whoever you wanted to have guard Jimmy. But to me, if they take 2 games from them, that's pretty demoralizing. Like if that's a 1-8 matchup, that's pretty demoralizing for me going into the second round, where then you're going to have to face one of the most improved teams in the Eastern Conference, if I had to guess.
One last point I want to add in on that is that we didn't really get to see this, because the Heat weren't at full strength, but also Porzingis didn't really get to play in the playoffs. But if you watch the matches throughout the season and the first couple games, the big reason the Celtics, I never feared the Heat last year, was the Porzingis addition was almost like a addition to beat the Heat. Like you throw him at the top of the key. The big problem the
Yeah.
Celtics had for years with the Heat is that defense that they would throw at him, where they would throw that zone at him. It was just kind of forced perimeter shots where you drive into the paint and everyone collapses on them and they would lose the ball, especially someone like Jalen. You throw it to Porzingis at the top of the key. It's almost like, a get out of jail free card. He can see over everyone. He can shoot over everybody. Like it just completely changed the game, especially for someone that's like almost automatic from the top of the key, the free throw line. So if he's healthy in this thing, yeah, like Bam has a physical advantage over him, but he has the size advantage. Like him being able to just nail, like you watch game one of the finals where that spot, he just could take any shot he wanted. And if you double him, somebody else is open, and where everybody in our team can shoot from the perimeter. So I think if he's healthy in this hypothetical, like I can't see us losing more than one game.
Well, here's what I'll say: the NBA GM survey that came out the other day, Eric Spoelstra was voted the coach with the best in-game adjustments. So I'll leave it at that. So if he can't adjust to Porzingis knocking down those shots, then that's on him. But according to
they
GM,
just might not have the personnel though. Too, they just might not be physically able to adjust to that, and that might not necessarily be his fault. He can try and scheme it up all he wants, but at a certain point, what are you going to do about a guy who's 7'3" bombing threes from 40 feet? Like
I mean,
Khalil Ware has the size, but he can't keep up with him.
Right. If Ware's all the way out there too, I mean, they're just going to get backdoor cuts and dunks.
I don't want Khalil Ware on him. I don't think that's
out
there.
Yeah,
100%. Bam can guard the 1 through 5, and I'm a firm believer in that.
Going back to what you were kind of saying at the beginning of this part of the conversation, the flip side of what you were saying, with the Heat, like maybe possibly putting a scare in the Celtics, and I'm going to sound again like a total homer, like I probably always do on this podcast. But the thing that I think should scare teams around the league is that the Celtics went 16-3 through the playoffs, and I know there were a lot of injuries and guys out and all that stuff. But in all seriousness, the Celtics themselves weren't even at the top of their game. Like they could have been better. Tatum was good, but can be great. Porzingis missed the majority of the playoffs. Like they still have room to grow. And I think that should be terrifying for opposing teams.
I don't like Jason Tatum, and that's going to upset both of you.
Fair.
I don't like the guy. I think he's super corny off the court, and I don't think he makes a lot of the good decisions he should when he's on the court. I think he either shoots too much from the outside at 6'10", or when he's cold, he just attacks the basket wildly. So to me, a lot of them getting to full strength depends on how Tatum plays this year, which is weird considering he's their best player. But he wasn't their best player in the playoffs, and I would imagine you guys would agree with that. So that's a problem. If your best player,
he was closer to their best player than I think people would think. I think that I don't know. He contributed in more ways than I think people could see. But I don't think, again, Jalen was their best player the entire time. There's no debate about that.
Yeah,
I think there's a difference also optically. Yeah, optically versus numerically. Like numerically, he actually was their best player for the postseason and for the finals. One thing that gets left out of this is if you actually start looking down, you breaking down, like especially the way the Heat guarded him. Every time he touched the ball, he's getting double teamed. He has like a third defender kind of roaming around. If Jalen was the number one focus of the defenses versus Tatum, that changes things as well. Like Tatum's just the focal point of the opposing defenses, so that changes the way he's getting viewed as well. And he's not as demonstrative as someone like Jalen or, as we alluded to, Anthony Edwards, but he is the Celtics' best player. I mean, the corny stuff, I'm not going to get into all of that, but like he is their best player, and like Jalen just had more memorable moments, and that's why everyone's like, well, Jalen was their best player. But you start breaking down, like looking at game film, you look at numbers, like Tatum is their best player. Yes, I think he has higher levels he can reach, and as you alluded to as well, if Porzingis is healthy, it's a whole different team, regardless of. I think the Celtics ceiling is a ceiling that no other team can reach. It's just, if they're not hitting their ceiling, other teams' floor is raised a lot over the course of this offseason. So it might not be as clean of a path, but if the Celtics are healthy and clicking, I don't think anybody beats them.
And that's where I give a lot of credit to Tatum too, just because he was willing to, and again, the stats might tell a different story. It doesn't look like he deferred to Jaylen Brown, but he did. Like he was willing to pass the torch on to Jaylen Brown to be like, I'm getting double, triple teamed. I am more than happy to give you the ball with a favorable one-on-one matchup to a guy who, in Jaylen Brown, honestly is a number one option on 15 teams in the NBA, if not more. Like he's got to be the best second option in the league, I would think. So, and Tatum is like, I see that. So I'm willing to give the ball up, to give a little bit more of the shine up to you, where, I just want to win games. Like, I think that's what he's all about at the end of the day.
So 2 things on that. You think Jalen's better than Anthony Davis?
I mean, I don't think Anthony Davis can stay on the floor. So that's part of my consideration.
I mean, people say that's the narrative, but go look how many games he's played over the past couple of years.
I know, but so there's so many games where he just like tweaks a knee and goes back to the locker room. Like, games played might not tell the whole story, I think.
He's healthier than people give him credit for, but you have a point there. And then here's my other question. Where would you guys put Tatum, like, ranking? Like, top 5, top 10? Where would you guys place him on that? Because you guys brought up.
I think he's top 5, but I think he's 5. You know what I mean? Like, I think he's the middle of the pack of the top 10. Like, if you want to make an argument for 6 or 7, I think that's fine. I would say 5. But
player, right? And he's getting double teamed. Wouldn't you argue that a top 5 player in the league should be able to overcome double teams and still act as the team's best player? Because every other guy in that top 5 for me can overcome a double team.
I mean, I think he did, though. If you look at like statistics, he was one of the few players in NBA history to lead their team in pretty much every numerical, like, statistical category offensively.
Horrible. His efficiency was horrible. Like, I mean, I feel like it was really bad throughout that playoffs.
Yes, but what I would argue is, and if you look at a guy like LeBron when he was in Miami, like, how many times did you see him pass for the final shot to somebody else? Like, I think there are different ways of beating double teams than just splitting the defense and going in for a dunk or hitting a fadeaway 3 over somebody. Like, he might not be that guy, but I think he still has his ways of beating double teams, if that makes sense.
Yeah, just to me, it not being the way of, like, you can still score the ball through a double team, that's what kind of pushes him out of that top 5 for me personally. To me, he would probably be 7 comfortably, probably in my top 10. But I mean, it's only a 2-spot difference. How much can you really argue?
Right, and that's what I said. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and go back and forth about like 1 spot or 2. Like, I would say 5, you say 7. I think that's fine. Maybe we meet in the middle at 6 and call it a day.
Sure.
But anybody that has him outside the top 10 is just a Celtic hater or a Tatum hater. I mean, the thing is, a lot of people take optics and career into consideration where it shouldn't. Like, it should be, if going forward, like, for anybody putting LeBron or KD over him at this point, like, this isn't to say Tatum's better than them all time, but they'll look at the Olympics like, oh, these guys dominated in the Olympics and Tatum didn't even play. I'm like, that's not a fair comparison. Like, Tatum's a better player than those 2 are right now, and I think it has been for the last couple of years. I think better than KD since they played against Brooklyn in 2022, where, like, you're watching the 2 and it was clear who the better player was. So I mean, yeah, obviously you're gonna have Jokic, you're gonna have Luka up there. Giannis, and then after that, it's like
Embiid.
Yeah, but the thing with Embiid as well is, like, if Tatum was getting knocked for not winning a championship, how do you not knock Embiid for never staying healthy, never being able to advance in the postseason?
Because when Embiid's on the floor, he's the best player in the league, no questions asked. I mean, that dude averaged.
It's the first few words of that, when Embiid's on the floor.
Yeah, when Embiid's on the floor, correct. Which is why he's not number 1. That's why he wouldn't be number 1 for me. That's why he would be probably number 4 for me.
And that's also someone that, like, he can't keep him, like, it's his style of play that's so unaesthetically, like,
pleasing.
And the reason, and that's another reason he gets hurt as much as he does, and the reason that at the end of games that he's as tired as he is because he spends the whole game flopping to get his free throws, to get his points, to get his numbers up. And then you look at a guy like Horford, where it's almost like the rope-a-dope method. Like, yeah, he's going to always get his numbers because it's a Joel Embiid. He's just a dominant player. But when you spend the majority of the game, playing the way he does to get those points, to get those numbers, at the end of the game, you're tired. And you have someone like Horford on you become more passive. You're not demanding the ball. And then his greatness is minimized, where he's not, like, even if he has that ability, like, he's not a top 5 player in the postseason just because of his play style. And you don't have him when you need him.
Yeah, but Embiid, like, yes, foul baiting, getting to the free throw line is a big part of his offensive play style. But then you also look at what this guy does from the elbows. Like, he has one of the most ridiculous mid-range games I've ever seen for a player his size. Like, it is unreal to me when I watch the Sixers and this dude's shimmying, taking fadeaway mid-ranges and just sinking them at will. Like, to me, his game does get overpowered by the free throw line. It does. That's what kind of the front of it is. But behind that, he still has an offensive game. Like, you take away the foul baiting, he doesn't average 35, don't get me wrong, but he still probably averages 25, 26 points a game.
One player that I'd say most people put above Tatum, and I don't understand why he has the hype, is SGA. Because if you look at SGA, the way he gets talked about, you would think he's Anthony Edwards or like someone that's like really young, like 21, 22 years old, like this budding superstar.
26, 25.
He's only 9 months younger than Tatum. Tatum has this incredible playoff resume, now a championship. He already had a finals appearance prior to that. Like, SGA is just kind of coming out now, and they're roughly the same age. He's 1 year younger. A big part of why Tatum is not putting up the 50-point games like, twice a month like he used to is because the team he has around him and he's focused on winning, where like a lot of times like they can make that extra pass and you have 5 guys on the floor that can hit perimeter shots and it's about winning. Whereas SGA, I mean, he does have a good team and that team is constantly improving, but they need him to score 30 a night to have a chance to win, where the Celtics don't need that from Tatum.
Yeah, I would agree. But before like the Boston had this whole new look roster with Drew, Derek, and I'm genuinely asking, I can't remember what would Tatum's numbers have looked like then with just him and Brown? Was he averaging like 28, 27? Was he in that range?
I can pull it up.
Yeah,
I
would
just to get the actual numbers.
So he averaged over 30, not this season, but the season before. And that's when they had less mouths to feed. But he was also younger. But the 2021 season, right before the season before they got good, he had several 50-point games, including one in the playoffs where he was playing the super team Nets basically by himself. Then the following season, when they went on that midseason turnaround where they vaulted all the way to Game 6 of the finals, like he was a dominant player. He had 46 at Milwaukee in an elimination game. Like he had several 50-point games as well. The last 2 seasons, particularly this last season, is when he started to deviate more, when you just had such a team of high-level players that him scoring 30 plus or 40 plus wasn't the best way for the Celtics to win. So it was like he prioritized winning because that became the big knock on him. It's like, oh, well, why doesn't he have a championship? Even though he's 26 and he was getting talked about like he was some journeyman 38-year-old that hadn't gotten over the hump. So I think you put him on any other, like not any other team, but put him on the Charlotte Hornets right now. He's averaging 36 a game because he's going to take the amount of shots. He may be a little efficiency, but
I
like,
mean,
he doesn't need to do that on the
look
Celtics.
what Terry Rozier was doing before he went to the Heat when he was on the Hornets. He was averaging like all-star level numbers. Like anyone can average crazy numbers on the Hornets. That's a good point. I do think Tatum's one of the more overhated guys in the league. Yes, there are some fair criticisms on him that I agree with, specifically to do with Jalen scoring over him in the playoffs, but we won't circle back to that. But he is overhated. I would agree with that.
So Tatum, I was just looking at his numbers. 2022-23 was the year actually that he averaged over 30 points. The year before, I think he was at 26 or 27. And so 22-23, they had already brought in Derek White. Like the team was probably more talented than it had been before. But again, as Alex said, like he was so much younger before. He was still kind of in that coming up stage. And after that 1 year that he did average 30 points was the year in between the 2 finals appearances where he gets hurt and, they lose him and they're now not in the finals. The 1 year that they honestly may have been even better than last year prior to, I think, I don't know. You have to factor in the Porzingis thing. Like if he's fully healthy, they're definitely better than that team, but he wasn't. So, I'm just kind of looking at it from that standpoint, but Tatum carried a lot of the load that year. So,
yeah. I would agree.
So moving on, I guess the only other thing we had on the last couple things we had on the list were, do you think this is kind of a bounce back season for the Heat in the East? I know you mentioned before, they probably aren't going to compete for the conference. They're not going to be in the finals, but do you think maybe their young guys like Jaquez and even Jovic, like, do you think they take a step forward? And do you think they maybe are a little bit more competitive than they were last year?
And I have one point to add before you answer. What do you consider a successful Heat season?
Yeah, that's probably a good way of asking it.
I look at this as, I would describe it as what you call like an individual year. Everyone is figuring out where they're going, what they're doing. First, you got Jimmy. Is he staying long-term? Is he going to stay healthy? is he going to go elsewhere? That's what Jimmy's figuring out for himself this year. Pat Riley, he's figuring out, am I going younger? Am I keeping Jimmy long term and potentially moving Tyler Hero? Then you look at the Jaquez and the Jovic. Now that Caleb Martin is gone, I actually talked with Jaime earlier this summer about this. These 2 things that he said he's really working on this summer. He's worked on all summer. It's his 3-point shot, and it's stepping up on defense. He's now going to take an increased role on because Caleb's gone, which I think is great for him. I think losing Caleb was a blessing in disguise. That deal that they were rumored to sign him to, I think it was 4 years, $60 million or something like that. That would have been a bad deal. I'm glad Caleb turned that down and went elsewhere. Now Jaime gets a chance to step up. Jovic is probably going to be the 5th starter alongside the quartet of Terry, Tyler, Jimmy, and Bam. So, it's clear Spo has a lot of trust in him just to kind of be that glue guy. That's what I see Jovic as. He's not going to develop into a star, an all-star, but if he can make, he can rebound, he can score, he can shoot. He just kind of does everything well. He doesn't do anything at an elite level, but to me, if he continues to do everything well, he can be that glue guy that the Heat need him to be.
As far as outcomes, though, what would you say, as far as, I guess, where they finished in the regular season and where they finished in the playoffs? Would you say, okay, yeah, obviously you want to win a championship or make the finals, but assuming that's not realistic, what would you say, okay, this was, outside of individual accolades, as far as team success, this regular season and this playoffs, okay, I can deal with that. And I guess you can throw in okay, how certain players perform during it, but I guess what makes you walk away, at the end of April, May, June, whatever, whenever the Heat season ends, and be this was a successful season, even without a title?
So last year they won either 44 or 46 games, one of the two. So to me, a successful season is tacking on at least a couple wins to that, with hopefully a healthy Jimmy and Tyler. And then in terms of playoff outcome, I expect them to be in the play-in again. I think anybody that thinks they can get in the top 6, that's pretty bold, in my opinion, looking at how good the East is. So to me, if they get in the play-in, let's say they're the 7, they're playing the 2 seed. We'll say it's the Knicks. If they take the Knicks to 6 or 7 games, that's a successful season to me, because then to me, I think Jimmy's all right, if we're competing with these teams right now, we can bring this team to 6 or 7 games, give Pat Riley an off season to build some stuff up around me now that I've extended, and we're going to be rolling the following year. And then you open up a probably 2-ish year championship window where Jimmy can still be your number 1 guy with Bam right alongside him.
I think to get to that championship window, you need to see a lot of development from young players that you may have to package to get an additional star to elevate you guys. Because no matter how good, I think Jaime Hawk is a good player and he's going to get better. I think Khalil Ware will constantly get better. I think Jovic is actually a good young player. I don't see the internal growth being enough in the next 2 years in those players to elevate you to championship level status. But you may have to deal 1 or 2 of them along with some picks that could bring you in a player that could put you that level if that's the direction the Heat go. If the Heat either losing the play-in or just they make the playoffs, but they're just kind of almost essentially humiliated, as last year, but with Jimmy, something like that. Then it's okay, it's time to move on from Jimmy. We're gonna elevate the young guys. We'll maybe get a player that fits more along Bam's timeline. So it's just like I said, as long as there's real expectations, you never know. You have to be in the game to have a chance to win. So they have to be in the playoffs. And I think actually winning the first play-in game, if that's the route they go, and having the Knicks or Bucks or Sixers in round 1 as opposed to the Celtics gives them a much better shot at extending the series and potentially winning it. I think avoiding, and I said this last year, avoiding Boston round 1, and this isn't even a homer take, they're just better than those other teams. And I think he'd have a better chance of upsetting one of those teams currently than this current iteration of the Celtics. So if the Celtics are the 1 seed, winning that first play-in game, which they've lost the last 2 years.
Yeah. Their competition in the play-in's probably going to be pretty poor this year. Like last year, at least Philadelphia was there. They're obviously going to move up a lot more than that. So it's hard to imagine them losing that first play-in game and ending as the 8 seed, just because, they're probably going to have the Hawks.
They lost to the Hawks 2 years ago. So.
Yeah, fair. But I mean,
Well, and who knows what the Hawks are going to be now that
without
Risa-
DeJounte,
whatever the
yeah,
heck his
exactly.
name is. Like,
Reese Hachey, yeah. But yeah, to me, it's really a matter of just making a little bit of noise against a good team in the first round. I think then Pat Riley needs to go out and he needs to find a superstar that's available. I mean, you saw the 2023 offseason. They spent the entire summer trying to get Damian Lillard, and the Blazers front office did not want him in Miami. They did not, because they probably know that's going to be a really good team if Damian Lillard goes to that roster, and he ends up in Milwaukee. And that was honestly a pretty big disaster year one. So I think they need to look around the league, assuming they make some noise in the first round against a good team, and they need to package Tyler, one of Hame or Jovic. I don't know which one it would be. I would prefer Jovic to be dealt rather than Hame, and then draft capital, and you go out and you get a third star and you compete with that big three.
so Jaquez, like, I remember watching him at UCLA. Like I that was one of the seasons I just was like really bought in on college basketball. Like especially a couple years they made some deep runs, obviously in March Madness. This is reason number 1,000 that I could never be an NBA GM. I always looked at Jaquez and I was like, this is a nice college player. He'll dominate at this level, but I don't see him being a major contributor in the NBA. And he comes in for Miami, and he's like one of the better rookies from his class. So that shows what I know. And Jovic, like, to me, he seems like kind of the mystery. Like, he could swing either way. You said, it sounds like he's going to be one of the starters to start out. I feel like he could be a guy that blossoms into somebody who's a real contributor for them, or he could be coming off the bench after a couple weeks. Like, I see both of those as real possibilities. So I'm a little bit curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I was just pulling up something that I talked with, as you mentioned, like you saw Hame in college, you weren't like nothing special.
He's again a really good player,
right, yeah.
and at the college level. I don't know if it was just his body type or what didn't necessarily jump out to me as like an NBA prospect, but. Obviously I was wrong, which is, maybe I shouldn't even be talking about basketball, but who knows?
Yeah. So I actually talked to Jame's AAU coach earlier this summer, and I thought he said something very interesting. Is what I didn't know was Jame wasn't a super big recruit. Like, yeah, he ended up at UCLA, but he didn't have every college picking up the phone. Like, so you're not wrong to say like he looks like a good college player. Every college wasn't knocking down his door. Like, but what he also said is Jame could just give you whatever you needed. He can mesh with whatever system. And I think that's what's made him so good with the Heat, is the Heat have a really good system. So when you put a guy who's good at meshing with any system in a really good system, that's a recipe for success to me.
I was just trying to look up his high school ranking. I'm trying to pull that up because I want to see like what his recruit level was. Let's see. I'm going to try and pull it up. So you guys, if you have something to talk about, please feel free.
Well, I was going to have 2 points. One of them is kind of off topic, but I mean, with Jaime, like some people that like the 4-year college players, like someone like a Peyton Pritchard, someone like a Grant Williams, someone like a Jaime Hawkins, like a lot of times, or even Baylor Shireman right now, although he's a little younger, but people that come into the league with like they don't have the highest draft stock because they're like, well, if they were good enough, they would have left 2-3 years ago to come in. So they feel like their ceiling is lower. But a lot of times they're more likely to be instant contributors to a team. So if in your scenario where the Heat, are going to package someone to move forward, I think Jovic, depending on, I guess, how the season goes, but someone like Jovic may have more value just because he's younger and there's still maybe a higher ceiling. At least that's how he's viewed by other GMs. Whereas like Jaime Hawkins may be the superior player right now, but because of his age, they may feel like he has a more limited ceiling, and that like if you're a contender trading someone, okay, like he can step probably more right in and be a more useful player. And from the Heat's perspective, if they're looking to go for it, a year from now, then I would almost rather trade off Jovic because Jaime Hawkins may be more helpful to the current team. Plus, Jovic may be able to get you like a bigger piece back or be viewed higher. And then one other point I want to make as far as the team like taking it seriously, not only Jimmy Butler playing the preseason, but him showing up to media day looking like a normal person this year as
Well,
opposed to all the
wait,
different.
wait. Unfortunately, I would love for that to be true. Jimmy and
Showed up late to it,
literally,
but
I was literally excited that he showed up like completely normal, and he was like, "I had something planned," but because he had some flight issues, so he didn't have time
the
to
flight
do
issue.
that.
Pat Riley made the call.
But yeah, I wish that was a sign that he was locked in, but no, he just had some flight issues, and I was scared to see whatever I thought he was going to come out bald, to be honest with you, but that's
So the Jaquez recruiting class, he was in the 2019 high school class.
right,
He
yeah.
was 100th on 24/7. He was a 4-star recruit. He was the 100th recruit nationally. If you guys get a chance, go and look at this class because it is incredible. Just the top 10. Let's see. Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, Cole Anthony, Isaiah Stewart, RJ Hampton, Vernon Carey, who was a bum, Scotty Lewis, who I thought was the second coming of Michael Jordan, watching his highlights. Like, I thought that kid was incredible, and he went to Florida and hasn't really done anything. Nico Mannion, who's like a G League guy. Precious Achua. Tyrese Maxey is number 10. Like, I could go down this list. You'd be shocked at how – oh, that's nothing. Trust me. I can keep going. Jaden McDaniels. Let's see. Josh Green. Jeremiah Robinson Earl, Oscar Sheway. I mean, LaMelo Ball was in that class. Like, it's insane, the number of NBA guys in that class. But Jaquez, I can see why maybe he didn't stand out in that class because it was maybe so good. So,
yeah, like he wasn't this guy dropping 90 points a game or whatever LaMelo did. He was just doing everything. He was just doing everything at a good level. Like, sometimes that's not what colleges want, which is weird to me. But
LaMelo also had a different situation, a different fanfare, his name in the show and all of that. So,
and even still, I think as I was just looking at that, he was still in like the 20s of the prospect list. Like, at the end of the day, people still didn't quite view him as, what maybe his father thought he was.
That guy, man. Guy thought Lonzo could beat MJ one-on-one. So what does he know?
Or so thought LiAngelo was an NBA player.
Yeah, well, he did lead the league in steals. So let's see. Going back to the Heat, like, who do you think? You kind of mentioned packaging some of the young guys for another guy. Who do you think is the guy that they should target out there? Like, who do you think that they should be looking at across the league and saying that's our next guy? Because obviously Jimmy is on the way out. At some point, he's older. Maybe he gets another contract, but you might need to move some guys to get somebody a little bit younger. Who do you think they should be looking at?
I think if Jimmy does extend and they're looking to compete, we'll first go with that scenario. I think it's not crazy to monitor what's going on in Milwaukee with either superstar, in all honesty. If this Dame Giannis experiment just completely blows up in their faces, like, either one of those guys could be available for the right price at that point to me.
Do you think you have what it takes to get Giannis when teams have much more assets around the league? I mean, obviously Giannis.
I think if Giannis becomes available, every team in the NBA is going to come knocking on their door. But I also think Giannis is going to have a big say into where he goes. I don't think Milwaukee's just going to deal him wherever. I think they have the respect for Giannis to kind of give him some say in the situation. And to me, Miami would be one of the better situations around the league to go to.
I don't see any scenario where they have the package to even entertain it, though, unless like Jovic or Jaime Jaquez turn into this like budding superstar. Like, I just think there's so many more teams, including look at like in Oklahoma City. Like, they're at the level they are right now as far as talent on the floor, and they have every draft pick the next 5 years.
Right, and Giannis, like I said, it all depends on where Giannis wants to be. Like I mentioned earlier, Jimmy loves the city of Miami. I don't know if I take Giannis as that type of guy. So Oklahoma City might be an ideal destination to him. Living out there in the middle of nowhere, like, that might be ideal to him compared to the big city life in Miami. So I also think they could revisit Dame. I'm not specifically mentioning Giannis in that. As for other guys, I really hope they do not go after Bradley Beal if he becomes available again. Stay away from Bradley Beal. I think that guy is like the most overrated player in the league. Like, what does he do well? I don't really know. Like, that guy, As for other people around the league, I mean, it really Donovan Mitchell extended, Lauri Markkanen extended. Like these are guys that
Yeah,
were
but how much does that? I mean, does that mean anything anymore? Guys want out faster than
right.
their
True.
contracts run
Yeah. So
out.
those are always players to monitor. I would look to maybe a guy like this is a weird one, but I mean, actually, nah, that wouldn't work. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it in my head, but I don't know. It really guys will ask out at the weirdest times is the way I view it. Like Donovan Mitchell never asked out, but everyone thought he did. Everyone thought he wanted to get traded this offseason. That was the big talk. And then he didn't. And then you have the stars that are silent and then they get traded. So to me, it's hard to predict, but I would say monitoring the situation in Milwaukee is a big one. Just keeping an eye on Donovan Mitchell, even though he extended. Lauri Markkanen is one of my favorite players in basketball. I think that dude is severely underrated. So those are some names to watch, in my opinion.
As Ryan said, like I said, the extensions they do for the money doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be there for the duration of that
Yeah.
contract. I think a big thing you have to monitor as well, especially if you're keeping Jimmy Butler, is don't put all your chips to the center of a table for a guy like KD or LeBron, someone that's like at the end of the
Oh,
rope where
old?
like you're sacrificing the whole future of the
Yeah.
franchise for a 1 to 2 year window where you still may not be good enough to win. Like I
Mhm.
think the two pieces you mentioned, like a Donovan Mitchell, a Laurie Markin, like you can go get those guys while
They're
keeping your
young
big
enough where
two.
they can
And they're
contribute.
young enough where even when Jimmy goes off into the sunset, like your team doesn't just bottom out and you have no assets. Like you can still be
Exactly.
competitive.
So Lillard, I was going to say this while you guys were talking. Damian Lillard's 34. He's only a year younger than Jimmy Butler. So as far as the Milwaukee situation, Dame might be a little bit on the older side where they might not want to trade, one older guy for another, and leave themselves in a similar situation if Dame is on the decline. Especially for guards, they just tend to wear down right around where he is. I still think he's a good player, and it's. You never know in a vacuum how one specific guy's going to last. I can't say that, he's going to get hurt or he's going to be done. Like, it doesn't matter. But and then as far as Giannis goes, Jeannie Buss doesn't have any children, but if she did, I think she would sell her firstborn for Giannis. Like, I don't know if, as Alex said, I don't know if Miami's going to have enough to compete with what teams like the Lakers are going to want. What the Lakers are going to be able to or want to offer for Giannis, because I think they are a team that's going to probably be desperate with LeBron likely on the way out too. And who knows what's going to happen with Bronny James at that point. I mean, is he going to still be on the team?
My goodness, man.
maybe they can flip those two straight up. Bronny,
the Lakers are the
I
most
think
ridiculous team in basketball, man. I don't know what goes on in that organization. Like,
it's Hollywood.
Yeah,
literally.
and it's always been that way, and it's always going to be that way with them. They're going to pander to their stars. They're going to overpay guys. They're going to overhype guys like Austin Reeves. Like, he's a nice player, but if he wasn't in LA, I don't think anybody would know his name. I mean, we would because we're paying attention, but the normal person on the street, if you asked somebody in a random NBA city who Austin Reeves is, they'd be like, who?
Yeah, but one name that just came to my mind that is probably the most possible and one of the better ones, in my opinion, would be Trae Young. Decent age. Atlanta could blow it up after this year. I don't see why they wouldn't. I mean, I
was very surprised that they moved on from DeJounte over Trae.
Yeah.
So
I think they can move on from both, honestly.
I have a lot of respect for Trae because I think he's a good dude. I think he's a really good player. He represents the city well. And living here, I pay a little bit closer attention to the Hawks than probably a lot of other people do. But there's something about him, and the advanced numbers would not suggest this because I've looked at it. Nobody cares about VORP or Raptor or any of these things, but I kind of do because I pay attention to that stuff. In his draft class, he's right up there in terms of, like, it's basically the WAR stat for basketball, where, like, over the course of his career, how much of a winning player are you? Trae Young is a lot higher on that list than you might expect for his draft class.
Yeah.
But there's something about him that to me strikes me as not that much of a winning player. So I don't know. And again, I'd have to dig deeper into the numbers as to why he comes up so high on that list. But I would have kept DeJounte over him personally.
I think in a system like Miami with, the kind of the culture of the organization and someone like Spoelstra, I think you might get the best out of him. It depends who you have around him because he is a big defensive liability. So then that doesn't really fit with what the Heat do. But if they have enough guys on the rest of the team that do
Yeah.
play defense, then that might not be as big of a deal. And he's such an offensive plus, at least, shooting and passing, that I can see that. And you could get him low as far as value that you'd have to give up, especially at this point in his contract.
You could get him.
You'd be buying low on him right now for sure. You would absolutely be getting kind of a steal on him if you can get him. I think that'd be a good move for somebody.
He could even get moved mid-season if, like, let's say the Heat or tethering around the 6-7 seed in Atlanta, as they probably will, are going to suck.
Falling down,
They could be like, okay, we'll take Jovic. We'll take Jovic, a few draft picks, and let's move forward. And that actually would elevate you guys, not to the level of like where the Celtics are, but like to an actual playoff team though, where you can have you can really compete a little bit in the East.
And as for the defensive liability, the Heat play so much zone, like I wouldn't even worry about it. Like, yeah, he's going to get beat sometimes. No denying that. But it's not a team that's playing man-to-man on a nightly basis where he's going to be matched up one-on-one with Steph Curry and all these guys. So that would help him at least to an extent.
So I guess the last thing we have on our list is just to talk about the rest of the East, the rest of the league. We've kind of talked a lot about that already. We haven't really talked much about Philly, who you are obviously heavily invested in watching. So as far as, I guess, just the state of the East in general, how are you feeling about the 76ers, and what do you think their expectations are this year?
Yeah, their expectations are, is Joel Embiid going to stay healthy? We talked about it earlier. That is the number one most important thing. If Joel Embiid is not healthy, they do not matter in the East. It's that simple. Tyrese Maxey and Paul George would be a great duo in the regular season, but that team is not competing with the Celtics and the Knicks. If Joel Embiid is healthy and the rest of the roster is healthy, I mean, they brought in so much depth this offseason that's not talked about. Reggie Jackson, Andre Drummond, Eric Gordon, McCain looked good. Like, all these guys, like, you brought in some serious depth. You kept Kelly Oubre. If that team is fully healthy going into the postseason, there's no reason they can't come out of the East. Like, I genuinely believe they can come out of the East if healthy.
I think Philly's ceiling definitely got higher in getting Paul George, but now what you have with Philly, and I do like the roster. I think it's a much better roster than they've had in the past few years. But I think instead of just having one big injury concern to worry about with Joel, you have two now in Paul George, and it's their two best players. I mean, you could put Maxey, maybe say he's their second best player. It depends how you view him. I like him a lot. But basically, arguably, your two best players are your biggest injury concerns, where it's like, if you look at other teams like the Celtics, like Porzingis, as great as he is, he could go down and the team not necessarily might not miss a beat. They could still win the title without him. They just did. So if Paul George or Joel Embiid are not healthy, then they're not winning anything. Like, you need both of them.
But to me, that's why they brought in as much depth as they did. And specifically in those two rooms, they brought in a lot of depth, is because I don't think either of these guys are going to play a lot of games in the regular season. And I think fans are going to freak out. Why are they not playing all this? And I think it's all going to be intentional. I think they want them to be healthy in the postseason more than anything, as they should. That is the most important thing for Philadelphia. So I think the depth with Tyrese Maxey at the helm can get them to a top 4 or 5 seed.
But the big thing about that, though, is you say 4 or 5 seed, they got to be top 3. Because let's assume in this scenario, the Celtics are the 1 seed. If you get 2 or 3, you're avoiding them to the conference finals. Maybe somebody else takes them out. If you're 4 or 5, you're seeing them round 2. So that,
But then you go back to
that's kind of the ceiling of the
Miami plays in round 1 and tires them out. Then Philadelphia could have a really easy 4-5 seed matchup where they're just playing like an Indiana or a Cleveland, where they can just they wouldn't cruise against either of those teams. Nobody would, but to an extent, like, you're not playing the Celtics or the Knicks or I would rather play the Indiana Pacers in a playoff series than the Miami Heat, in all honesty. Something about the intensity level would just scare me more with Miami than it would with Indiana. So you go into the second round and Philadelphia could be better off, and Joel Embiid's going to be the best player on the floor if he's on it. Is always my thing. If you have the best player on the floor in a series, you have a chance. That's how I look at it.
And that's fair. The Maxey thing. So Maxey, to me, really good player. Don't get me wrong. I think he's like starting to reach the peak of his career, like really coming into his own, and a great player. I do think he's one of those guys who has been so underrated that he's now overrated. Like, I think people are looking at him a little bit more than what he actually is. And I don't know if he's one of those guys that carries a team the way that, he might be looked at.
I agree. I would compare him to like a Jamal Murray, somewhere in that realm, where he's a great complement piece. He's not going to win you a championship. He's not going to get you to a top 3 seed like LeBron would with all those Cavs teams that were trash. Like, no way he's like that. I just more mean when you don't have Paul George and Joel Embiid on a nightly basis, like Tyrese Maxey can win you.
They're going to win games.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, especially in the regular season, they'll have no problem like winning plenty of games against, especially some of those bottom feeding teams in the East. Like, I think there are some of those teams that several of the teams at the top should really eat up games a lot against those guys. Whereas maybe the West has a little bit more depth on that side, but I do think maybe a little bit more of the better. So I said this on a past podcast too, and you can feel free to disagree with me, but I feel like the East has better constructed teams. They might not have more talent than teams in the West, but I think that the teams in the East are better constructed to win a championship 100%. Than a lot of the teams in the West.
A lot, yeah. The majority, I would say that's true, with the exception of the Nuggets. I think the Nuggets are one of the best constructed rosters in the NBA. Everybody around
lost a few key pieces like the last 2 off seasons that it's going to limit their ceiling. But I still think, and I don't know if they'll necessarily make the finals, but I would say if you ask me which team scares me the most, it's still that team because of the roster, because of Jokic and Jamal Murray in the playoffs.
Yeah, like a team like OKC has so much young talent, but like how well are they actually constructed? Like, yeah, I think they're a top 2 team in the West. But
they're a weird team. Like,
yeah, I would agree
down the roster. Like, they have a lot, and they have a lot of talent. They have a lot of assets. They still have assets in draft capital. Like the Alex Caruso thing is interesting. Hartenstein, like, these are good players, but how are they going to mesh?
Yeah, agreed.
That's a team I can see making a play for Jimmy Butler because they have the assets to do it, and he would fit that team really well. Like mid-season, if the Heat aren't going anywhere.
Yeah, I could. Yeah. I was literally about to say OKC just feels like they're missing like that one like centerpiece. Like SGA is the best player on that team and will be, but he's just not that like veteran leader who's still talented that I feel like OKC just doesn't have.
So I think maybe where that changes is Chet Holmgren almost in a way flew under the radar last year as it was technically his first year. But people are looking at Wemby as like, this generational rookie, which he obviously is, and he's going to be one of the best players in the league. But Chet was not that far behind him. Like, he's a really, really good player. So I think if it's the SGA and Chet show, they're going to be fine. And they have a lot of talent around him. I think if they can get the chemistry with the 2 new guys they brought in, like, they'll still be really, really good. And they're obviously one of the top teams in the West. The Nuggets, I think there's a little bit of hothead potential there for it to kind of blow up. Like, Jamal Murray, number one, he's coming off that injury. He was weirdly not that good in the Olympics. And I just wonder if he kind of maybe gets a little antsy and might want out of there at some point. And honestly, the coach scares me a little bit. Malone, I think, is a good coach, but he's a little bit of a weirdo. Like, he just says some weird things, takes some shots at Embiid about like what country he's going to play for in the Olympics. Like, he's just a weird dude.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for things to blow up there. It's just, can they hold it together? Like, I mean, that's the reality of it, because that roster is really good, especially at the front. I mean, you have one of the most athletic power forwards in the game to complement Jokic. You have a small forward who doesn't pass the ball and just shoots threes at will next to Jokic. And then you have Jamal Murray, who is the ultimate X factor in the NBA. He either scores 3 points or 30. So it's an interesting roster. I think it's well constructed. They did lose depth, like Alex was saying, though.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like we've pretty much hit on everything that we wanted to touch on, but was there anything else that you guys wanted to throw in?
Nothing
Sweet.
from me.
No, I think we've
All right.
covered it all. It'd be like I said, definitely a team to watch just because of what could be at stake for the Heat. And then as a Celtics fan, I mean, especially one that has been living in Miami at least until this point, it's always a team I keep tabs on. But I just feel like they might have added incentive in the regular season that they haven't had in the past seasons just due to impending free agency and things around the team. So definitely a team to watch in the East outside of like the major teams that we're expecting to be at the top of the conference.
Absolutely. And I mean, everybody knows to watch out for the Celtics. They just won the championship. That's said in itself.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, Anthony, thanks for coming on. This has been a great way to get some insight on the upcoming season and the matchup and the expectations for the Celtics and the Heat. And I mean, we talk so much about the rest of the league too. So we appreciate you hanging out with us. We are just over 2 weeks away now from the start of the regular season for the Celtics. So we're getting ready to be in full swing here, talking about real games that count. And it keeps getting closer by the day. I think we're all ready for the league to be back. Alex, go ahead.
Oh, I'd say so a week from tomorrow. For the
a
Celtics.
week from tomorrow. Oh, yeah, you're right. Oh my goodness. So I think I wrote that down because we didn't talk last week, so I had that in my notes for 2 weeks, and we missed a podcast last week because of the hurricane with Alex and everything going on down in Florida. So thankfully, first of all, Alex is all good. Just to be clear, he's fine, and moving up to Boston now, so that's exciting. But yeah, so 1 week away, which is scary. It's coming up fast. So I guess we can just kind of wrap it up. So for myself and Alex and Anthony, we will catch you guys next time.
Ends tonight here. It's over. Time to say it again, Boston. Anything's possible. Banner number 18 has been secured. The Celtics are NBA champions.